The Book of Enoch was banned from your Bible, and you should ask why. This ancient text talks about giants, angels, and divine rebellion. But here's what they don't tell you. Ethiopian Christians still kept it in their Bible. Why? Because Ethiopia preserved truth when Europe edited it out. They didn't want you knowing angels fell on Mount Hermon, a place near Africa. Punchline: if it wasn't true, why is the Vatican so quiet about it? People ask, where are the lost tribes of Israel? Here's a thought. You're looking in the wrong continent. Tribes in Ethiopia, Nigeria, Ghana, they follow ancient Hebrew customs. Circumcision, kosher-style diets, Sabbath-keeping, the Lemba people in South Africa. DNA tests show links to the Levites, one of the original priest tribes. You still think they vanished into Europe? Nah, they didn't get lost. They got labeled tribe, pagan, African, but their roots, Hebrew. What if I told you the Tower of Babel wasn't in Babylon, but in Africa? Hear me out. Genesis says all humanity spoke one language and tried to build a tower to reach heaven. That would have happened early in civilization. And where did civilization begin? Africa. Even science backs it. Humans originated in East Africa. Some researchers link Babel's story to ancient African ziggurats and temples, massive structures, towering ambitions. Same energy. It's not proof, but it makes you wonder, was Babel actually built where humanity began? They never told you King David was black. King David danced out his clothes, but they forgot to mention he was black while doing it. David? The shepherd who became a king? 1 Samuel 16:12 says he was ruddy, which doesn't mean pale. Nope. It means glowing skin, rich tone. Combine that with his ancestry. Descendant of Ruth the Moabite, who came from a land just east of Egypt. Look it up. Those were brown-skinned people. And his son, Solomon, straight up said, I am black and beautiful, in Song of Solomon 1:5. You really think that came from a white man? They really tried to whitewash the man who carried Jesus' cross. Simon of Cyrene, the guy literally forced to help carry that weight? He wasn't some random dude from down the block. Cyrene was in North Africa, modern-day Libya. That makes Simon an African man, plain and simple. Growing up, nobody painted that picture for me. It was always some vague figure. But knowing he was African, a black man involved in that pivotal moment, changes things. It's not just trivia, it's representation that got buried. Makes you think about whose stories get told and whose get conveniently forgotten. His strength mattered then. That white Jesus above Grandma's couch? Yeah, that's not Jesus. Sorry to your childhood coloring book. Let me bring you back to reality, little Timmy. Let's talk facts. The image of white Jesus came from Cesare Borgia, a pope's son who modeled for European artists. Blonde hair, soft skin, blue eyes. In the Middle East? Nah. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, hid in Egypt, Matthew 2:13, and looked like someone who could blend in with Africans. Burnt bronze skin, woolly hair, Revelation 1:14. They gave you a colonial cover model and called it the Messiah. But that's not divine, it's deliberate. You've been worshiping propaganda in a frame. Let's fix that. Moses married a black woman. Yeah, I said it. And the Bible backs it up. Numbers chapter 12, verse 1 says, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married. Cush means ancient Ethiopia. That's straight East Africa. And guess what? The Bible claims God clapped back. Numbers 12, verses 7 through 8 says, With Moses I speak face to face. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant? So yeah, Bible claims God was on Moses' side. Now tell me, how does a pale Moses marry an Ethiopian queen and nobody bats an eye? That's not blending in, that's erasure. They whitewashed the whole story, and oh yeah, Moses was black too. But that's a sermon for another day. Most Christians don't even know this exists. The Ethiopian Bible is older than the King James Bible and has 22 more books. The Bible you grew up with? It's missing chapters. The Ethiopian Orthodox Bible includes 88 books used for over 1,600 years. It has Enoch, which talks about the Nephilim, giants, angels, and secret knowledge. Rome banned it, England ignored it. But Ethiopia preserved it, because Christianity didn't start in Europe, It started in Africa. This isn't alternative religion. It's the original one. So the real question is, if they deleted entire books, what else did they erase? Disney erased a black legend. Walt Disney didn't start with a mouse. He started by erasing a black man. Let's talk about Floyd Norman. Floyd Norman, first black animator at Disney. The man behind classics like Sleeping Beauty and The Jungle Book. But do you know his name? No, of course not. While Walt got statues, Floyd got sidelined. They used his talent, then kept his face out of history. Even when he brought culture, comedy, and characters to life, his legacy got swept under a cartoon rug. You praise Disney magic. A lot of it came from a black pencil. He was the real legend behind the scenes, and they buried him like a deleted scene. Wake. Stop saying black people sold themselves into slavery. That's a colonialist lie. Before you start crying, shut up and give me 30 seconds to explain. That idea came from colonizers, not history. The reality, Africa is a huge continent with thousands of different tribes and cultures. A tribe in West Africa didn't see themselves as the same as a tribe hundreds of miles away. They weren't selling their own. They were selling outsiders, prisoners of war, not their neighbors or cousins. Let's flip the script. If Germany attacked France, would you say Europeans attacked their own people because they're both white? No. Or if Egypt attacked Somalia because they're both African? Of course not. So why say that about Africa? Because racism made all African people seem the same, just black. That lie keeps getting repeated to take the blame off the real villains. The Bible's black bloodline, they erased it on purpose. Moses, Solomon, Jesus, all had African ties, but they whitewashed the whole book. Moses married a Cushite, Numbers 12:1. Cush equals Ethiopia. Solomon, I am black and beautiful. Song of Solomon 1:5. Jesus, bronze skin, woolly hair. Revelation 1:14-15. That ain't a coincidence. That's a pattern. The Bible is full of black prophets, kings, and tribes. But look at church art, movies, children's Bibles. They erased the melanin, rewrote the legacy. If you think color doesn't matter, ask yourself, why'd they change it? Jesus had a sister, and yes, she was black. Most people don't know Jesus had siblings, but Matthew 13:56 says, aren't all his sisters with us? That's plural, more than one. Now, there's no name given in the Bible, but thousands of early church writings and traditions, like in Judea and early North African Christian communities, talk about Jesus's brothers and sisters being from the same fall harvest family in Nazareth. I think geography. Jesus grew up in the sun-baked region of Galilee. Same dusty land as North Africa and the Levant. Revelation 1:14-15 describes him with hair like wool and feet like burnished bronze. If Jesus was black, wouldn't his family share similar features? So, how does a whole family survive in that climate and come out looking like a bunch of Kardashians? Think about it. Would his sister really resemble a pale princess? That Bible story you love? The Good Samaritan? Yeah, he was black too. Let's talk. Luke 10:30-37 tells the story. A Samaritan helps a beaten man after religious folks walk right past him. Samaritans were hated, marginalized, and they weren't white. They were from the Levant, neighboring Ethiopia and Egypt. Travelers described them as dark-skinned and curly-haired. Jesus used a black man as the example of divine compassion, and Christians still miss it. The hero wasn't rich or powerful. He was the one y'all would have crossed the street to avoid. Albert Einstein, he stole from a black man. Einstein was a genius because a black man laid the foundation. Let that cook. Ever heard of Lewis Latimer? He was a brilliant black inventor who worked with Edison and helped improve the light bulb. But even deeper, Benjamin Banneker, a self-taught black mathematician, published complex astronomical charts decades before Einstein was even born. These weren't flukes. Black thinkers like George Washington Carver and Garrett Morgan were developing systems and patterns that mirrored theories of relativity. You think Einstein cooked it all alone in a Swiss lab? No, he stood on melanin-covered shoulders. Jesus died with a black man by his side. Jesus had a black man by his side on the road to Calvary. You just never got told. 15:21 says Simon of Cyrene carried Jesus' cross. Where's Cyrene? North Africa, modern-day Libya. So a black man helped the Savior when no one else would. What did Europe do with that? Erased it from art, from movies, from your Sunday school posters, but it's in the Bible, plain as day. You got Jesus and a black man walking to the crucifixion together. And somehow they still sell you a story with 12 pale disciples and a European Christ. Stop. The last book of the Bible was written by a black man. Revelation, that wild, apocalyptic book, written by a black man exiled to an island. Facts. The book of Revelation was written by John on the island of Patmos. But here's what they don't say. Early Ethiopian churches preserved Revelation before Rome even canonized it. And early North African Christians, dark-skinned, native, and wise, were the ones passing this text around. They want you to picture white monks in castles. But it was black bishops on the continent translating and preserving the word. Even Jesus in Revelation 1:14-15, bronze skin, wool hair. You do the math. Adam in the Bible was black. Stop playing. Adam was black. Yeah, the first man was made from dirt, not flour. Instead, crying. Just listen to me. Genesis 2:7 says God formed Adam from the dust of the ground. And last I checked, rich soil ain't beige. Nope. It's brown, deep, melanin-rich, black. The Garden of Eden, linked to Ethiopia and the Nile region, Genesis 2:13. That's East Africa. So you really think God made Adam look like Thor? Be serious. The first human came from Africa. Even science backs that up with mitochondrial DNA. They flipped it to make you forget you were the original. But the Bible never lied. Nope. Just the storytellers did. Don't tell me the Bible ignores black women. They just erased them. Let me fix that. You ever heard of the Queen of Sheba? 1 Kings 10. She came to flex on Solomon with gold, spices, and questions that stumped the wisest man alive. Ethiopian, East African. And she walked in like royalty because she was royalty. Their union? It started the Solomonic dynasty in Ethiopia. That ain't a side story. Nope. That's black excellence baked into biblical bloodlines. But they don't teach you that. Nope. They give you Cinderella stories and erase the queens from scripture. Nah, we're bringing them back. Jesus had a brother, and he was black too. They don't even tell you Jesus had siblings, let alone that his brother was black. Before you start crying, shut up and give me 30 seconds to break it down. Mark 6:3 names. Jesus' brothers, James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. These weren't European choir boys. They grew up in Galilee, and Galileans were brown, rugged, working-class men, not pale philosophers sipping wine. James, Jesus' brother, led the early church, and early Ethiopian art depicts them with tight curls and dark skin. But Renaissance art flipped the switch, turned them all into white robes and soft curls. But they were men of the Middle East. That means melanated. That means ours. They erased the family. Not anymore.
God is black. Everybody knows God is white.
Everything the white man taught you, you accepted. He taught you you were a black heathen, and you believed him. He taught you to worship a blonde, blue-eyed Jesus with white skin, and you believed him. He taught you that black was a curse, and you believed that. Did you ever look up the word black in a dictionary?
For what?
Did you ever study anything that wasn't part of some con?
What the hell for, man?
Come with me. Black, destitute of light, devoid of color.
The original Statue of Liberty wasn't about immigrants. It was a tribute to freed slaves. Before Lady Liberty was green, she was black. Yup, the first statue sent from France, a black woman, chains broken at her feet. This wasn't just about immigrants. It was a direct tribute to the black emancipation movement after the Civil War. But when it came to America, they rejected it. Too powerful, too black. They changed her face, changed the narrative. Why? Because they couldn't have a symbol of freedom that reminded them of black power. But guess what? The sketches and early models are still out there. The truth was buried, but we're bringing it back. Deception. The images you see, they're not just wrong. They're a calculated lie. Moses, Solomon, even Mary. Evidence points to their true black heritage. Song of Solomon 1:5 screams, I am black and comely. Jeremiah 14:2. Judah mourneth. They are black unto the ground. Ancient historians describe them as dark-skinned. The shocking part isn't just the whitewashing, it's the deliberate erasure of a divine connection, stealing a legacy. Why are they so afraid of you knowing the original blueprint of faith? What power does that truth unlock in you? You ever wonder why they call it the King James Bible C, but never tell you who King James really was? Because he was a black man. Yup. King James VI of Scotland, I of England, the one who authorized the Bible translation in 1611, wasn't white like they show in portraits later. No. Early paintings show him with dark features, wide nose, curly hair. And he came from a line of black Moors and Scottish nobility. But centuries later, Artists started updating his image. Lighter skin, narrower nose, European eyes. You know the drill. Why they hide it? Because the idea of a black man authorizing the most printed book in history doesn't sit well with whitewashed narratives. But history is messy, and black royalty was real. They just don't want you to know that. The Bible's biggest figures, they were African. They erased that fact on purpose. Moses, he married an Ethiopian woman, an African. Zephaniah, straight out of Cush, which is modern-day Ethiopia. Jesus, you can read it in the Bible. Bronze skin, woolly hair. These aren't just minor details. Nope. They were facts. The Bible's greatest figures were African, no doubt. But look at how they're portrayed in church art today. Blonde hair, pale skin, that's not divine. It's deliberate erasure. And why? Because they didn't want you to know the truth that they weren't the only ones with power. They erased the African roots on purpose. They rewrote history to fit their narrative. But the facts don't change. History was twisted. But the truth, it can't stay hidden forever. It's time we see the Bible for what it really is. An African story, too. Jesus isn't even his real name. So what are we really saying when we pray? The name Jesus is the result of translation on top of translation. His original name in Hebrew, Yeshua, which means God saves. Here's where it gets wild. Yeshua was transliterated to the Greek Isus, then Latin Iesus, and finally became Jesus in English, centuries later. That means the letter J didn't even exist in his lifetime. It was added 1,500 years after he walked the earth. So when you say Jesus, you're using a European remix of an ancient Hebrew name, and nobody in his time would have recognized it. Makes you... Meghan Markle wasn't the first black royal. She might not even be the boldest. Long before Meghan Markle broke the internet, Queen Charlotte, wife of King George III, was already raising eyebrows. 18th century portraits show her with visibly African features, high cheekbones, fuller lips, and dark, curly hair. Even royal historian Mario de Valdes y Cocom argued she descended from Madragana, a black Moorish noblewoman. She was mocked in newspapers for her looks, and some artists even tried to lighten her skin in later paintings. So when people lost their minds over Meghan, just remember, the British crown might have had black blood for centuries. What if I told you the first president of the United States was a black man named John Hanson, not George Washington? Yep, history's got a twist. Elected by the Continental Congress in 1781 under the Articles of Confederation, Hanson served 8 years before Washington. His title? President of the United States and Congress assembled. Hailing from Maryland, Hanson's leadership came first. Yet you won't see his face on money or in mainstream history books. Somehow, Washington became the iconic face of American presidency. Funny how some stories slip through the cracks of history, right? Exposed! They whitewashed the Bible. Its heroes were black. Scriptures are the undeniable proof. Moses in Egypt, Solomon and Sheba. African lands, skin like bronze, hair like wool. Geography confirms this isn't just portraits. Nope. It's our stolen heritage, a deliberately buried, world-altering truth. The biggest revelation? Jesus. His lineage, Mideast birthplace, point to a man of color. Society erased it. This truth empowers. It's written, it validates. Feel that fire of reclaimed history? Why hide this? What else are they concealing? Your eyes. Africa's country borders were drawn by Europeans. So why do we still follow them? Ever notice how Africa's borders look like they were drawn with a broken ruler? That's because they were, by Europeans. At the Berlin Conference in 1884, they literally sat around a table, carving up a continent they didn't even live in. They split up kingdoms, tribes, and cultures like it was a pizza. No consent, no logic, just straight-up land theft in a suit and tie. And today, those same borders still stand. Still dividing people, still causing conflict. Why do we still follow maps made by colonizers? Africa wasn't born this way. It was broken this way. They faked the lines, but the truth is still there. The dark side of black billionaires. Ever wonder who the richest black men in history were? Spoiler, it's not all gold chains and glory. Mansa Musa was richer than Elon, Bezos, and every tech bro combined. But his gold pilgrimage crashed Egypt's economy for years. Marcus Garvey built a global shipping empire, but the FBI sabotaged him, and shady investments took it all down. Robert Smith paid off student loans for a whole college class, then got caught in a $140 million tax fraud case. Power ain't always pure. Nope. Aliko Dangote is Africa's richest man, but critics say his monopoly crushes smaller African businesses. Annie Malone mentored Madam C.J. Walker and became the first black woman millionaire, but lawsuits and jealousy erased her name. Black wealth made waves, but behind every empire is a truth they tried to bury. Moses, black. Solomon, black. Adam, black. Yeah, they lied to you. They gave you whitewashed Bible stories, but the scriptures say otherwise. Before you start whining and crying, shut up and give me 30 seconds to explain. Moses lived as an Egyptian prince. You think a white man could pass in ancient Egypt?
No bars, nigga!
And in Exodus 4:6, his hand turns white from leprosy, then back to normal. That don't hit the same if he was already white. Solomon literally says in Song of Solomon 1:5, I am black and beautiful. Not sun-kissed, black. And Adam? Genesis says God made him from the dust of the earth. What color is rich soil? Dark brown to black. And science agrees. The first humans were African. They erased it for centuries. But now you know, so what are you going to do with it?
I do have this conversation a lot with Africans or even these Caribbean people who will often look down on Black Americans. Number one, they will say they lazy, they ghetto. I've heard African parents tell their kids not to date African American men, not to marry them, things of that nature. What are some negative stereotypes y'all heard about Black Americans from your parents, from your friends?
You literally said it all.
Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Like my mom would tell me not to marry that.
Yeah.
Right.
She says it all the time.
Even when I hear like African parents say that, it very much sounds like the same rhetoric that a white person would tell their kids. Like, you know, don't marry that black guy, like he's ratchet, they ghetto. It's crazy to hear other Black people have that type of rhetoric towards each other.
That white Jesus you pray to, that's Cesare Borgia, not Jesus. Let me drop some truth on you. White Jesus was invented by the Borgia family. That white Jesus everyone pictures, yeah, that's not even close to what he really looked like. That image is Cesare Borgia, the son of a pope, who was used as a model for Renaissance artists. The real Jesus? He had woolly hair and skin like bronze, as described in the Bible. But they erased that, didn't they? Why? Because they needed to make divinity look like them. If Jesus looked like us, they'd have to admit something they don't want to. This isn't just art, it's propaganda. And it's
All the women in this tribe pierce their lips like this, but why do they do it? This is an ancient tradition of the Mercy tribe in Ethiopia, passed down for thousands of years. When a woman reaches adulthood, she must do this. But why insert a lip plate? Well, the plate is a symbol of beauty. The bigger the plate, the more beautiful and loyal the woman is considered by the tribe.
King Solomon was richer than Musk, Bezos, and Mansa Musa combined. Before you start whining and crying, shut up and give me 30 seconds to explain. King Solomon wasn't just rich, he was obscenely rich. Like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk would have been begging this man for startup money, rich. According to the Bible, Solomon received 25 tons of gold every year, just in annual tribute. That's over $1.5 billion a year. And we're not even counting his silver jewels, land, livestock, or control of ancient trade routes. The man had entire fleets of ships bringing him gold from Africa and spices from Arabia. The Queen of Sheba pulled up with literal treasure chests just to ask him questions. And here's the kicker. 1 Kings 10:23 says, Solomon was the richest king to ever live. Ever. That includes today. So when Forbes drops those billionaire lists every year, just know they're all fighting for second place.
I've heard a whole lot of negative things from the white people here. When you're trying to explain yourself, the white people don't want to hear you explain yourself. They drown you out. They start already trying to drown you out and talk over you. There's a certain amount of white arrogance here, and they don't want to listen to what black people are saying. They don't understand because they don't want to understand. I've heard a woman here say, go back to Africa. Somebody said, we have a black holiday. What does that mean? So what does that mean? He did not say that. He said, if we have a choice, what some of us can go and some of us can stay. But there's no understanding in here. People are just trying to talk.
To those arrogant persons, you know, when you tell us go back, please remember where you came from. And when you want to relegate somebody to a specific place, just remember what your origin is in this world. Please, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I want you to understand that you, wherever you are on the earth, you're not a native anywhere. You came there and took it from the native people who are there. So please don't talk about going back, because if others talk to you about that, where would you go?
The Statue of Liberty was originally a black woman. Before you start whining and crying, shut up and give me 30 seconds to explain. The Statue of Liberty was supposed to be a black woman, not this green nonsense. The Statue of Liberty wasn't always the symbol you think it is. The original design was a black woman holding broken chains at her feet, representing black emancipation after the Civil War. America couldn't handle that. Too powerful, too black. So they whitewashed it, changed the face, and twisted the story. But the original sketches, they're still here, hiding in plain sight. Liberty was ours first, and they can't erase that. They told you Jesus carried the cross alone, but forgot the black man who helped him, Simon of Cyrene. Sounds familiar? Probably not, because Hollywood edits him out every time. He's the African man. Yes, African. Who helped Jesus carry the cross? It's right there in Luke 23:26. Cyrene was a North African city in modern-day Libya. So the first person to share Jesus' suffering was a black man. But where's his movie? No halo, no spotlight, just quietly erased. It's almost like they don't want you to know how deep Africa ran through the Bible. Buddha was black. Yeah, I said it. Cry if you want to, but give me 30 seconds and I'll change your whole worldview. Let's stop acting like Asia was cut off from the rest of the world. Early depictions of Buddha, especially in India and Southeast Asia, showed him with tightly coiled hair, full lips, and broad features. That's not the shaved head, sleepy-eyed statue you've seen at a spa. Those curls, they look way more like locks or tight coils than anything from East Asia. That's not random. That's ancestral DNA carved in stone. Buddha wasn't a pale monk with a dad bod. He looked more like Terry Crews than a sumo wrestler. The earliest statues of Siddhartha Gautama came from regions with African and Dravidian influence. That's historical fact. It wasn't until later, during colonization and cultural cleansing, that the image of Buddha got whitewashed. Soft, chubby porcelain Buddhas you've seen? That's a remix. China and Japan redesigned his image to reflect their own cultures. What if I told you the oldest languages on Earth are African? And that ties back to Babel. They say language began in Mesopotamia, but that's a flat-out lie. Africa is where the oldest languages have ever been recorded. Look at Khoisan with its unique clicks, Amharic, Yoruba. These languages predate Greek, Latin, and all those Eurocentric roots. After Babel, people scattered. But where'd they go? Africa, the cradle of humanity. That's where the foundation of language began. But they don't teach this in schools, do they? Why? Because if they did, they'd have to admit that Africa wasn't just a backdrop, it was the origin. The first president was a black man, George Washington, and he's on the $2 bill. Before you start crying, shut up and give me 30 seconds to explain. And no, I ain't talking about Obama, I'm talking about John Hanson. He was elected under the Articles of Confederation in 1781. 8 years before George Washington ever threw on that dusty-ass powdered wig, looking like an off-brand Mozart. Hanson was a black man from Maryland, elected by the Continental Congress, and they straight up called him President of the United States in Congress assembled. That's not a TikTok title, that's the full title. Look it up. Here's the kicker. He's actually on the back of your $2 bill. Yeah, go look at it. History got whitewashed harder than a Hollywood casting call. But not in your dusty-ass school books. And definitely not in the museum gift shop. Why? Because they erased him like he missed rent in whitewashed history. They lied to you. They painted your prophets white when the truth is written in black and white. Start with this. Every major Bible story before Rome took place in Africa or the Middle East. Jesus, born in Bethlehem. Moses, raised in Egypt. Egypt, where the people were black. The land of the pharaohs. They hid that from you on purpose. You think Moses could hide among Egyptians and be pale? Make it make sense. Jeremiah 8:21 says, I am black. Lamentations 5:10. Our skin was black like an oven. The Bible said that, not me. But your Sunday school didn't preach that, huh? If the geography lines up, the scripture confirms it, and the logic screams it. Why are the images still white? The first cowboys were black people. Before you start crying, give me 30 seconds to bring you back to reality. Hollywood won't tell you, but the first cowboys in America were black men. What's the real story behind the Wild West? Those iconic cowboys you've seen in movies, they were black. Yep, the first cowboys were slaves and freedmen who worked ranches in the South. The term cowboy was even used to insult them, while white men were called cowhands. But these black cowboys, like Nat Love and Bass Reeves, helped shape the West. Yet you never hear their names in Hollywood. Why? Because the truth messes with the narrative they've sold you. But we're flipping that script. The real cowboys, they were us. Why are people mad that the richest person in history was a black African? Jeff Bezos? Elon Musk? Nah, bruh. The richest man in history was a black. Before you start crying, give me 30 seconds to explain Musa's net worth. Estimated at over $400 billion in today's money. That's more than Elon, Bezos, and Bill Gates combined. And he didn't hoard it. He gave out gold like it was candy on Halloween. During his pilgrimage to Mecca, he gave away so much gold in Egypt, he caused a 12-year inflation crisis. He accidentally crashed an economy just by being generous. And while your billionaires are launching vanity rockets and profiting on Tariqs, Musa was building libraries, schools, and mosques across West Africa. Your richest rich guy is still living in Mansa Musa's shadow. They lied to you. Jesus' disciples were black. Forget what you've been shown. They weren't Europeans. Born in the lands of Galilee, Judea, and Egypt, These men thrived under sun-soaked skies, mirroring the people of North Africa and the Levant. Picture this: a young Jesus hiding out in Egypt, as told in Matthew 2:13. Would a pale-skinned child blend in there? Nope. Get real. Even Acts 13:1 speaks of church leaders with African roots and deep skin tones. Renaissance art gave you the wrong image with white robes and blue eyes. You're not seeing history. You're witnessing a makeover. The Last Supper was whitewashed. You ever seen the Last Supper painting? Jesus sitting at a long table looking like he just left Milan Fashion Week? Yeah, that's a lie. The real Last Supper wasn't a photo shoot for 12 white guys. Jesus wasn't white. Nope. Jesus and the disciples were darker-skinned, wool-haired men. The Bible, Revelation 1:14, says, hair like wool, skin like burned bronze. Translation: he looked more like your uncle at a cookout than some soft Italian model. The real Last Supper, they sat on the ground, tore bread with their hands, not Europeans with wine glasses. Da Vinci painted a lie to make Jesus look acceptable to white Europe. And y'all believe. If Jesus was actually white, why did he flee to Africa to hide? Use your brain and give me 30 seconds to explain. Let's break this down. King Herod wanted Jesus dead. So where did he run? Egypt. That's Africa. Now hold up. If Jesus was really white, do you honestly think he would have fit in there? Absolutely not. He would have stuck out like a sore thumb. He didn't run to Europe, did he? No. He ran to Africa for a reason. In Matthew 2:13-15, it says, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said. Take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. That wasn't some random choice. It was strategic. A white Jesus in Africa, he would have been found in a heartbeat, but he wasn't white. He was just like the people of Africa, and that's where he sought refuge. Why didn't they send him to Europe? They couldn't. He wouldn't have blended in. So let's be real. Jesus was one of us, and they've spent centuries hiding that truth. The reality, he looked like us, and he ran to Africa because it was home. The truth can't be erased anymore. The only reason your heart's still beating, aside from God, is because of a black man. Before you start crying, shut up and give me 30 seconds to explain Dr. Daniel Hale Williams. This black man was the first open heart surgeon. In 1893, he opened a man's chest and fixed his heart with no modern tools. White doctors, they weren't even trying that. He built the first interracial hospital while they were still segregating water fountains. Next time you thank medicine, make sure black brilliance is in that prayer. They erased him from your textbooks. I'm putting him back. The Statue of Liberty was originally black. No, that's not a conspiracy. That's history. Yeah, I know it's hard to accept, but just shut up for a second and give me 30 seconds to explain. The original Statue of Liberty wasn't about immigrants. It was meant to honor freed black slaves after the Civil War. The French abolitionists who funded it designed her with broken chains at her feet. Chains you can still find at the statue's base today. Early models show a black woman, not the European face you see now. But when America caught wind of the tribute, they rejected the black imagery and demanded changes. They softened her features, downplayed the chains, and rewrote the story. Today, they sell you a myth about immigration while hiding the real roots in black emancipation. The sketches still exist. Adam and Eve weren't white. Sorry to your childhood coloring book. Let's be real. The Bible, Genesis 2:7, says they came from the dust of the earth. And last I checked, dark soil ain't bathed. Nope. They lived in Eden, which scholars link to East Africa, near rivers like the Tigris and Euphrates, where all humanity traces back to. Genetics even proves first humans had deeply pigmented skin. You think two pale folks out in African heat made it without SPF 1000 sunscreen? Nope. Be serious. They weren't strolling through the garden in linen khakis. They were black, melanated. Africans are the blueprint. Black people are the only reason you know how to tell time. Before you start crying, shut up for a second and give me 30 seconds to explain. Benjamin Banneker, a black man, built America's first clock by hand. This genius reverse-engineered a pocket watch in the 1700s. While colonizers were still squinting at the sun like, it's probably noon, and using sundials like cavemen. Banneker also mapped stars, predicted eclipses, and helped design DC. But your dusty-ass history books taught you he helped Jefferson. Nope. Nah, he was the genius. They just stole the credit. Time's up on whitewashed history. Jesus wasn't white. Stop playing. Jesus didn't look like Thor. Nope. He looked like your uncle from Ethiopia who sells carpets in the market. Black! Before you start crying, give me 30 seconds to explain. The Bible literally says Jesus had skin like bronze and hair like wool. That's not blonde and blue-eyed. That's giving Middle Eastern, maybe even Afro-Asiatic vibes. He was born in Bethlehem, not Beverly Hills. You think a man walking through the desert, dodging Romans and flipping tables at temples, had clear skin and Pantene Pro V hair? Nope. Be serious. The white Jesus you know was created during the Renaissance to make him look more European. Vikings are actually black. Yes, there were black Vikings, black men in fur, with axes, raiding Europe. Before you start crying, shut up and give me 30 seconds to explain. Ever heard of Blaemotter? Norse sagas mention dark-skinned warriors fighting alongside Vikings. We're not making this up. Nope. They wrote it down. Africa wasn't just chilling. Black explorers were moving through cold countries throwing hands. But Hollywood gave you Thor and forgot the melanin. History's just propaganda with a budget. Now you know. Black people were in America first, not Columbus. Not some dusty-ass pilgrim. I know it hurts. Before you start crying, shut up and give me 30 seconds to bring you back to reality. His name? Estevanico the Moor, a black Muslim from Morocco. Pulled up with the Spanish in the early 1500s, before the Mayflower was even an idea. Survived shipwrecks, led expeditions, walked this land before Europeans could even spell Florida. And he wasn't just tagging along. He was navigating, translating, and brokering peace with native tribes. But they got you thinking Columbus discovered America. That man never even touched U.S. soil. Nope. Estevanico did. And like always, they erased him. Shakespeare was black. Or might have been black. I know. Your English teacher just fainted. Before you start crying, shut up and give me 30 seconds to explain William Shakespeare. The man, the myth, the mystery. There's barely any record of his life. No confirmed portraits, but some theories say he was actually John Black, a black playwright whose work got snatched and repackaged. You think some white dude from 1500s England wrote with that much soul, rhythm, and coded rebellion? Nope. He wrote about Moors, queens, betrayal, and blackness in Othello like he lived it. Some of those lines sound more like a spoken word cipher than a tea party. Could he have just stolen from black contemporaries? Absolutely. But either way, black brilliance shaped the bard, directly or through theft. Your fave might have been ghost written by melanin. Mona Lisa was black. Yeah, I said it. Mona Lisa was black. Before you start crying, shut up and give me 30 seconds. That famous smirk y'all romanticize, you've been drooling over a black woman and didn't even know it. Da Vinci's early drafts, tight curls, broad nose, deep skin tone. That ain't no pale European noble. Nope. That's melanin on canvas. Some historians say she was a black woman in Florence, possibly a servant, maybe even a lover. Da Vinci was obsessed with African features. Look at his other works. He wasn't hiding it. Nope. Even the painting technique he used, sfumato, layer shadows like rich brown skin, not porcelain. But they whitewashed her in museums and textbooks so your brain wouldn't short circuit. You've been staring at unapologetic black beauty. You really think Easter's about Jesus? Before you start crying over your chocolate bunny, shut up and give me 30 seconds to explain. Let's start here. Jesus didn't die in the spring, and he definitely wasn't resurrected next to a pastel egg and a rabbit. Nope. Where did the bunny even come from? That's not in the Bible. That's pagan fertility worship. Easter actually comes from Eoster, a Germanic goddess of spring and new life. Yeah, fertility, eggs, rabbits. You see the connection now? The church just repackaged a pagan holiday, slapped resurrection on it, and told you to dress up and eat ham. So, anyways, y'all are celebrating with deviled eggs and pork chops? Make it make sense. If you're gonna praise Jesus, at least use the right calendar. Beethoven wasn't just a genius. He was a black man. Before you throw your powdered wig, shut up and give me 30 seconds. I told you Beethoven was some pale, powdered composer who went deaf and dropped classics, right? Nope. Well, about that. Many early depictions show him with dark skin, wide nose, and coarse hair. Even his peers called him the Moor, not as an insult, but as a fact. Some historians believe his mother had Moorish or African ancestry. And listen to his music. Emotion-heavy, rhythmic, soulful. That wasn't just Europe's sound. That was pain in a minor key. Beethoven might have been the first black man to make white folks cry with a piano, and they never gave him the credit. The early Greeks were black. I know it's hard to accept, but shut up and give me 30 seconds to explain. Let's be real. Greece is right next to Africa. No sunscreen, no snow, and somehow they came out looking like Justin Bieber? Be serious. The Minoans, the first Greek civilization, painted themselves with dark skin and curly hair. Their statues, full lips, broad noses, tight curls. Sound familiar? Oh, yeah. Black people. And don't forget, they learned from Egypt, the black brain, trust of the ancient world. Socrates, Pythagoras, Plato. Yeah, they were studying African philosophy in Egypt 22 years before they had their own. But Hollywood gave them spray tans and British accents. The original Greeks looked more like Eddie Murphy than Brad Pitt. Just another chapter they tried to white out. Elvis was actually a black man. I know it's hard to accept, but shut up and give me 30 seconds to explain. Okay, he wasn't literally black, but everything that made Elvis, Elvis. Black people invented that. Black folks invented rock and roll. Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, they laid the foundation. Elvis just gentrified the sound, slapped a pompadour on it, and got crowned the king off our rhythm. And the world ate it up like it was original.
Nope.
He didn't create the wave.
Nope.
He just surfed it. So next time you call him the king, put some respect on the people he stole the crown from. The first president was a black man, not George Washington. Before you start crying, shut up and give me 30 seconds to explain. And no, I'm not talking about Obama. His name was John Hanson. He was the first president under the Articles of Confederation, 8 whole years before George ever touched that powdered wig. Hanson was a black man from Maryland, elected by the Continental Congress in 1781. And yes, they called him President of the United States and Congress assembled. But you won't find his face on the money or in your dusty-ass history books.
Nope.
Wonder why? Because they erased him. Just like they erase anything that makes black folks look Let's stop lying. Jesus wasn't white. And if that hurts your feelings, take it up with the Bible. Revelation 1:14-15 says his hair was like wool and his skin was like burnished bronze. You tell me what race that sounds like. That ain't blonde hair and blue eyes.
Nope.
That's melanin and kink. So why do churches still paint him like a Swedish pop star? Because a black Jesus don't fit the control agenda. But facts don't care about feelings. He looked like us. He came from North Africa and the Middle East. So, yeah, your Jesus had... The U.S. government poisoned black communities. Give me 30 seconds to explain before you start whining about conspiracy theories. Did you know the government tested drugs and diseases on black people? We've all heard of Tuskegee, but the truth runs much deeper. Black people have been used as guinea pigs for decades. They tested STDs on us, performed sterilizations without consent, and even exposed us to chemical weapons. Henrietta Lacks, her cells were stolen, used for research, with no compensation. And the U.S. government? They've done it all. Mississippi appendectomies, eugenics programs. These are not conspiracy theories, these are facts, and they're still trying to cover it up, but we can't let them erase this truth. It's time to hold them accountable. Black soldiers fought Nazis before America even showed up. Before you start crying about erased history, give me 30 seconds to explain something they don't teach you. Before America even touched World War II, black soldiers from Africa were already fighting Nazis. They were called the Tirailleurs Sénégalais, West African troops fighting for France. When Hitler invaded in 1940, France sent them to the front lines first. Not white soldiers, outgunned, under-equipped, disposable. And when the Nazis captured them, they didn't get treated like prisoners of war. They got executed, massacred in places like Chasselet, forced to dig their own graves because they were black. These men fought fascism first, and history tried to bury them. But we're digging the truth back up. Now you know. Cleopatra was not white. Use your brain and let me prove it in 30 seconds. Cleopatra was not white. Hollywood lied. Cleopatra wasn't some white European. She was African. Let's get something straight. Cleopatra was African. She ruled Africa, lived in Africa, and although her father was Greek, her lineage was shaped by centuries of African influence. Cleopatra spoke Egyptian, embraced African traditions, and ruled from Alexandria, a city that was a cultural crossroads of Africa. Ancient coins and art show her with features typical of African descent. Yet Hollywood keeps casting white actresses. Because a powerful black woman in history doesn't fit their agenda. They erased her true identity to control the narrative. But the facts don't change. Cleopatra was African, and the truth can't be hidden. The Statue of Liberty was originally a black woman. Yeah, I know it's hard to accept, but just shut up for a second and give me 30 seconds to explain. The original Statue of Liberty wasn't about immigrants. It was a tribute to freed slaves. Before Lady Liberty was green, she was black. Yup, the first statue sent from France. A black woman, chains broken at her feet. This wasn't just about immigrants. It was a direct tribute to the black emancipation movement after the Civil War. But when it came to America, they rejected it. Too powerful, too black. They changed her face, changed the narrative. Why? Because they couldn't have a symbol of freedom that reminded them of black power. But guess what? The sketches and early models are still out there. The truth was buried, but we're bringing it back. Everything you know about American slavery is wrong. The first legal slave owner wasn't some rich white plantation owner. It was Anthony Johnson, a black man who started as an indentured servant. Wild fact, Johnson worked his way up from nothing to own 250 acres and multiple servants in the 1600s. But in 1655, he did something that changed American history forever. He took his servant, John Kaiser, to court, demanding to own him permanently. The Virginia courts agreed. Just like that, Castor became the first legally recognized slave in America. One black man's court victory literally created the legal framework for centuries of slavery. Let that sink in. The man who carried Jesus' cross, he was black. I know, Jesus was black too, but give me 30 seconds to talk about this other guy. Let's set the record straight. Everyone knows the story. Jesus had to carry his cross to Calvary, but it was too much for him to bear. So, who stepped up to help? A man named Simon. But here's the part they don't tell you. Simon wasn't just any man. He was from Cyrene, a city in Africa. That's right, Africa. In Mark 15:21, it says, "A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross." Cyrene was in modern-day Libya, Africa. So let's be clear, Simon wasn't European. He wasn't some random bystander. He was a black man who carried Jesus' cross. They've erased this truth for too long, trying to fit a narrative that excludes the African presence in the Bible. But the facts don't lie. Simon was black, and he played a pivotal role in. This is not Jesus. Use your brain and let me prove it in 30 seconds. White Jesus everyone prays to. That's actually Cesare Borgia, the son of a pope. That white Jesus everyone pictures? Yeah, that's not even close to what he really looked like. That image is Cesare Borgia, the son of a pope, who was used as a model for Renaissance artists. The real Jesus? He had woolly hair and skin like bronze, as described in the Bible. But they erased that, didn't they? Why? Because they needed to make divinity look like them. If Jesus looked like us, they'd have to admit something they don't want to. This isn't just art, it's propaganda, and it's time to strip away the lies. The first cowboys were black people. Before you start crying, give me 30 seconds to bring you back to reality. Hollywood won't tell you, but the first cowboys in America were black men. What's the real story behind the Wild West? Those iconic cowboys you've seen in movies? They were black. Yep. The first cowboys were slaves and freedmen who worked ranches in the South. The term cowboy was even used to insult them, while white men were called cowhands. But these black cowboys, like Nat Love and Bass Reeves, helped shape the West. Yet you never hear their names in Hollywood. Why? Because the truth messes with the narrative they've sold you. But we're flipping that script. The real cowboys, they were us.
Why is it that rich white people do not have to show off their wealth the way black people do? I'll tell you why. Number one, non-Africans, white, brown, yellow, or red, they are preoccupied with the accumulation of power, not materialism.
Got you.
Black people are preoccupied with the accumulation of materialism. Number two, the Caucasian, the Asian, the Arab, they were never stripped of their self-respect. So they don't have a need. If he's worth $1 million, I may not see it.
Right.
If you worth $1 million, you're gonna have on a bling bling. His identity never went through the historical assault that your identity went through. You are on a never-ending quest to prove that you are somebody. He don't have to do that. You wanna know why? Him being white is enough to come into a room with.
White Jesus is. Your favorite blue-eyed savior was actually a dark-skinned Middle Eastern man. The Bible literally describes Jesus with skin of bronze and hair like wool in Revelations 1:14-15. Moses married an Ethiopian woman, showing God's people weren't white. King Solomon was described as black and comely in Songs of Solomon. Even when Jesus hid among Egyptians as a baby, he blended right in, because he looked just like them. Your churches hanging those European paintings are pushing a 15th century propaganda. The real Jesus looked more like me than any Renaissance painting. Facts don't care about your feelings. The Bible been telling you this whole time. They lied to you. The prophets in your Bible, they were black, African. And I can prove it in 30 seconds. Moses, born in Egypt, that's North Africa. Jesus, he hid in Egypt as a child. Why? You don't hide a white baby in a nation full of black people. He would have stood out like a torch in the dark. Song of Solomon 1:5. I am black and beautiful. Yes, that's in your Bible. Look it up. Jeremiah 8:21. I am black. Straight from the source. Start asking this. If it's all in the Bible, why aren't churches telling you? Who benefits from erasing black identity in Scripture? You tell me. Africans taught the Greeks a lot of what they know, but history won't tell you that. The Greeks didn't just admire Egypt. They studied under African masters. Pythagoras, the so-called father of geometry, spent 22 years in Egypt learning philosophy, geometry, and medicine. Thales, Greece's first philosopher, studied there for 7 years. Even Plato, one of history's greatest thinkers, stayed in Egypt for 13 years, absorbing its ancient wisdom. And Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine, admitted that Imhotep, an African multi-genius, was the real originator of medical knowledge. The famous Pythagorean theorem, Egypt had been using it to build pyramids 1,000 years before Pythagoras was even born. Plato himself said Egyptian education made students sharper and more humane. He even told his own students, if they wanted true wisdom, they had to go to Egypt. If you say, black people sold their own into slavery, you're falling for a colonialist lie. Here's why. The idea that all Africans were one people is a European concept. The reality? Africa is massive, home to thousands of cultures, languages, and ethnic groups. A tribe in West Africa didn't see themselves as the same as a tribe hundreds of miles away. They weren't selling their own. They were selling outsiders, prisoners of war. Let's flip the script. If Ireland invaded Poland, would you say they were attacking their own people just because both are white? No? Then why do people say that about Africa? Because white supremacy flattens every African culture into one label: black. They lied to you. The prophets in the Bible were black, and I can prove it. Let's stop pretending ancient Israel looked like a Hollywood movie. You really think Moses, raised in an African royal palace in Egypt, could pass as white? Nope. Nah. They'd never taken a pale foreigner as one of their own. Simple logic. That means he looked like them. That means he was black. Now look at Song of Solomon 1:5. I am black and beautiful, O daughters of Jerusalem. That's in your Bible. Jesus, born in Bethlehem, hid in Egypt, hiding a white baby in Africa? Make it make sense. They whitewashed everything, and you still worship a version of history designed to erase you? They don't want you to know. A black man carried Jesus' cross. They'll never tell you this in church, but the man who helped Jesus carry his cross was a black man from Africa. Simon of Cyrene. Yeah, from Cyrene, which is in modern-day Libya. Mark 15:21. Now, ask yourself, why don't they ever show that in movies? Why does every Jesus film erase the fact that an African man played a crucial role in the most important moment of Christianity? Because they don't want you to know how deep Africa's ties to the Bible really are. The truth is, Africans weren't just in the Bible. They were essential to it. They carried the cross, they preserved the scriptures, and they spread the gospel long before Europe even knew what it was. They've whitewashed history for too long. Time to wake up. They've been lying to you your whole life. King Solomon was a black man. Yeah, I said it. Stop falling for the whitewashed nonsense they keep pushing. The Bible literally proves it. Song of Solomon 1:5 says, I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem. You really think that's talking about his sandals? Nope. Be honest with yourself. Let's get real. Ancient Israel was way closer to Africa than Europe, and Solomon's mother, Bathsheba, had ties to modern-day Ethiopia. You really believe he came out looking like some pale European nobleman? Africans preserved the Bible while Europe was burning books. While Europe was too busy burning books and slaughtering each other during the Dark Ages, 5th to 15th century, Africans were holding it down and preserving the Bible. Ethiopian Christians safeguarded entire manuscripts and scriptures while Europe was drowning in chaos. But they'll try to convince you the Bible only made it out of Europe. Nah, that's a lie. Nope. Africa kept the gospel alive when nobody else would. Next time someone acts like Christianity's roots are all European, hit them with the truth. Africa was the guardian of the gospel. The Bible is the pure, untouched word of God? Think again. It's been edited, rewritten, and manipulated for centuries. Let's break it down. First, missing books. The Book of Enoch, gone. The Gospel of Thomas, erased. Who decided what stayed and what got cut? Powerful men with an agenda. Second, contradictions everywhere. Genesis says humans were created after animals, but in the next chapter, Adam comes first. So which is it? Third, thousands of versions. King James, NIV, Catholic Bible. Why so many if it's divinely inspired? Because it's been changed to fit different beliefs. Fourth, Jesus' identity flipped. One verse says Jesus is equal to God. Another says God is greater than him. Somebody's lying. Fifth, translation corruption. The original Hebrew and Greek were altered. The so-called virgin birth, the Hebrew word actually meant young woman, but they changed it to fit the narrative. The truth? The Bible has been tampered with for control. Don't just believe what they tell you, ask questions. The Bible's first Christian nation was in Africa, not Europe. Deal with it. They'll swear up and down that Christianity spread from Europe, but that's just a flat-out lie. The first Christian nation wasn't Rome or Greece, it was Ethiopia. Yeah, let that sink in. Ethiopia made Christianity its official religion in 330 AD under King Ezana of Axum, while Rome was still worshiping a bunch of pagan gods. You see, they don't want you to know that Africa was leading the way in spreading the gospel, while Europe was busy sacrificing to statues. The Bible even mentions Ethiopian believers way before Europeans got involved, like the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8:27, who was baptized by Philip. But they'll never highlight that in your history books because it shatters the Eurocentric narrative they've been pushing for centuries. They'll make you think civilization and religion only advanced when Europe stepped up. But nah, Africa had the truth first. Just admit it. You can't stand the fact that Africa was at the forefront of Christianity. Biblical prophets were black and they're hiding it from you. They'll tell you Moses was some pale European-looking dude, but how could that be true when he was saved from the Nile River in ancient Egypt? Egypt, full of dark-skinned people. How could Moses blend in with Egyptians if he wasn't black? Yeah, doesn't make sense, right? Thought so. And don't even get me started on King Solomon. He literally said it himself in Song of Solomon 1:5, I am black but comely. That's straight from the Bible. They don't want you to know that because it destroys the whitewashed version they've been feeding you. The oldest Christian churches, they're in Ethiopia, dating back to the 1st century. While Rome was still worshipping pagan gods. And guess what? Those Renaissance paintings showing white prophets, all fake, created thousands of years later to push a Eurocentric agenda. They couldn't handle the truth that the foundation of their religion was rooted in Africa. It's all been rewritten to erase black history. Wake up. Stop eating up the lies they've drilled into your head. The real story has always been right there in the text. They just hope you never look close enough to see it. So you really think Moses, Solomon, and Jesus were white? Seriously? Be honest with yourself. They got y'all out here thinking Moses, Solomon, and even Jesus were white. Really? Think about it. How was Moses a pale dude living in Egypt and somehow not even catching a suntan? Be honest with yourself. If Moses was white, how did he blend in with dark-skinned Egyptians so well that they mistook him for Pharaoh's son? Does that make sense? Nah, I don't think so. And let's talk about Solomon for a second. This man literally says in Song of Solomon 1:5, I am black but comely. You really think he's talking about the color of his sandals or something? Come on now, be real with yourself. Even Jesus, they got y'all convinced. He looked like a European model when Revelation 1:14-15 clearly says he had hair like wool and feet like burned brass. Does that sound like the paintings they keep showing you? Nah. During the Renaissance, European artists like Michelangelo and Da Vinci painted these prophets to look like themselves. It wasn't about accuracy. It was about pushing their own image as holy and pure. They don't want you to know the truth because it challenges the idea that Europe was the Africans translated the Bible while Europe couldn't even read. Bet you didn't know Africans were translating biblical texts while Europe couldn't even read. Yeah, let that sink in. From the 4th to the 15th century, Ethiopia and other parts of Africa were preserving and translating entire manuscripts while Europe was stuck in the Dark Ages, drowning in chaos and barely literate. Ethiopian scholars were translating the Bible into Ge'ez, an ancient African language, while Europeans were out here barely keeping up with basic literacy. They want you to believe that Europe was the center of Christian knowledge. That's a lie. Africa was translating, preserving, and keeping the gospel alive when Europe didn't even know what day it was. So next time they try to downplay Africa's role in Christianity, hit them with the truth. Africans were the real guardians of the word, holding it down while Europe was fumbling through the dark. Jesus lived in Africa, and they're hiding it from you to whitewash the Bible. They've been lying to you your whole life about Jesus. They'll shove that blonde-haired, blue-eyed version down your throat, but they'll never tell you the real story. How baby Jesus spent his early years in Africa. Yeah, you heard that right. When King Herod was out for blood, Mary and Joseph didn't run to Europe. They fled to Egypt, a black nation, to keep him safe. It's right there in the Bible. Matthew 2:13-15 says that an angel told Joseph to take Jesus and Mary to Egypt to escape Herod's wrath. Why don't they teach that part in Sunday school? Because it doesn't fit their whitewashed narrative. Jesus grew up surrounded by black culture and history, but they'd rather bury that truth to keep you in the dark. They don't want you connecting the dots because it exposes the lies they've been selling for centuries. The strongest man in the Bible was black, and they're hiding it from you. They'll hype up Samson's strength, his wild hair, and his legendary battles, but they'll never tell you about his roots. They don't want you to know that the strongest man in the Bible might have been a black man. Samson was from the tribe of Dan, one of the tribes with deep African connections. Yeah, that's right. The same Samson they paint as this pale, muscle-bound warrior might have actually been a black man. His hair, thick and dreaded like wool, just like it says in Judges 16:13, where he weaves his 7 braids into a loom. Sounds a lot like locks to me, and that unmatched strength, it makes sense when you trace his lineage back to Africa. But they'll never admit that, because they can't handle the truth that Africa's legacy runs way deeper than they want you to know. Makes you wonder why they're so quiet about it, huh? Moses' wife was a black African, and they're hiding it from you. You ever wonder why they never mention that Moses' wife was African? Yeah, they'll preach all day about Moses leading the chosen people, but stay silent on the fact that his wife Zipporah was a black woman from Cush, modern-day Ethiopia. You think that's just a coincidence? Nope. Nah, they don't want you to know how deep Africa's roots go in biblical history. And I'm not just talking, it's right there in the Bible. Numbers 12:1 says, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. They were mad because he married a black queen from Africa. But they'll gloss over that real quick because it doesn't fit the whitewash narrative. They'll act like Africa had nothing to do with the Bible when Moses himself was out here married to a strong black queen. They can't erase that, no matter how hard they try to hide it. Africa had universities before Europe even knew what a school was. Let that sink in. Meanwhile, Europe was out here in the Dark Ages, barely keeping itself together. While Africans were writing manuscripts and building knowledge hubs, Europeans were struggling just to survive. And yet they'll make you think civilization only advanced once Europe got involved. Nah, Timbuktu was already producing geniuses and intellectuals while Europe was still crawling out of ignorance. Timbuktu, an ancient city in Mali, West Africa, was a powerhouse of knowledge and culture. Scholars from all over the world came to study astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy. The University of Sankore and other institutions held thousands of manuscripts and served as centers of intellectual exchange, centuries before European universities even existed. Africans are poor, dirty, and live in huts with no clean water to drink. Nah, that's just what they want you to believe. They got you thinking Africa's just one big dusty wasteland where everyone's starving and drinking dirty water. But here's the truth. They'll show you some rundown village and tell you that's all of Africa, while half the time you're looking at stock footage from LA or Detroit. Yeah, cities right here in America that look just as rough, if not worse. And let's not forget Flint, Michigan. Still struggling for clean drinking water for years. But nobody's rushing to call the US a third world country, right? Nope. Meanwhile, Africa's got cities like Lagos, Nairobi, and Johannesburg popping off with skyscrapers, tech hubs, and more millionaires than they'll ever tell you about. See, the media makes bank off keeping Africa's image stuck in poverty mode. Why? Because if you knew about the trillions in natural resources and booming economies, they couldn't keep exploiting it. They want you to think Africa's helpless, so they can keep taking what's theirs without anyone batting an eye. Don't let them sell you the lie.
They didn't end slavery. They rebranded it. 1865. The Civil War ends and slavery is abolished. But here's the catch. The 13th Amendment left a loophole. Slavery is illegal, except as punishment for a crime. And just like that, Southern states went to work. They created black codes, laws that made it easy to arrest freed black people for almost anything. Walking without proof of employment, arrested. Standing in the wrong place, arrested. Petty crimes that white people got away with, black people got years of forced labor. They called it convict leasing, a system where prisoners were rented out to plantation owners, coal mines, railroads. The government made money, businesses got free labor, and black men were trapped in a new form of slavery. Fast forward to today. Private prisons are a multi-billion-dollar industry. They profit when cells are full. And surprise, surprise, black people are still disproportionately locked up.
This black-ass African stole a tactic from the Bible to defeat the Italians, to bury the Italians, and they got down on their knees. In 1896, King Menelik II of Ethiopia studied the Bible and saw how King David used strategy to defeat Goliath, not just strength. So, what did Menelik do? He took that playbook and used it to crush the Italians at the Battle of Adwa. How? Menelik used David's get the high ground and strike when they least expected tactic. First, he positioned his troops in the mountains out of sight, while the Italians thought they had the advantage on flat land. Then, when the Italians moved in, Menelik's forces struck from all sides, attacking at night and in the early morning using surprise and confusion to tear them apart. The Italians had no idea what hit them. They came with guns and fancy weapons, but Menelik had brains. And that's a dark skin versus light skin. Ever wonder why it's still a thing? It wasn't by accident. It was a strategy. In 1712, a slave owner named Willie Lynch allegedly gave a speech teaching white plantation owners how to keep black people divided and weak. His blueprint? Psychological warfare. Step 1, turn light-skinned and dark-skinned slaves against each other. Step 2, divide the young from the old. Step 3, make the house slaves feel superior to the field slaves. The result? A cycle of self-hate that lasted for centuries. And even though slavery ended, colorism didn't. We still see it today in media, in hiring discrimination, in beauty standards, everywhere. But here's the craziest part. There's no actual historical evidence that Willie Lynch ever existed. So why is his name everywhere? Whether he was real or not, the strategy worked. Africans are all over the Bible. They don't want you to know this. Let's talk facts. The Cushites weren't some small tribe. They were an empire. Cush, which is modern-day Ethiopia and Sudan, is mentioned over 50 times in the Bible. Their kings ruled Egypt. Their warriors were feared, and their influence stretched from the Nile to the Middle East. Moses' wife, a Cushite woman. The prophet Zephaniah, Cushite ancestry. And in Psalm 68:31, it straight up says, Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands unto God. But that's not all. Cushite rulers like Taharka weren't just mentioned in history books. They were out here, influencing biblical events. When the Assyrians tried to invade Judah, guess who came to the rescue? Taharka, a black pharaoh, leading the Cushite army. That's right, Africans were defending Jerusalem. But they don't teach that part, do they? Because admitting Africa's role in the Bible means exposing the lies they've been feeding us for centuries. But history doesn't lie. Africa was never in the background. It was always at the center of the story. Africans built the pyramids in Mexico, and we have the proof. The Olmec civilization, one of the oldest in Mesoamerica, left behind massive stone heads, some weighing over 25 tons, with unmistakable African features, including broad noses and full lips. These carvings suggest a cultural exchange between Africans and early Mesoamerican peoples. But there's more. Ancient DNA studies show possible African genetic markers in pre-Columbian populations, particularly along the Gulf of Mexico. Hints at African travelers arriving in the Americas long before Columbus. Even the techniques used to build the pyramids in Mexico bear striking similarities to those used in ancient Nubia and Egypt. The precision of stone cutting, the use of astronomy to align structures, and even ceremonial purposes mirror African architectural traditions.
They turned woke into an insult, and now they're using it to discredit black people who fight for justice. Let's talk about how DEI was hijacked too. The term woke used to mean something powerful in the black community. Being aware, conscious of injustice, and fighting for change. But now, it's been twisted into a weapon to silence those speaking out against racism. They call it too much or too radical, just for standing up for what's right. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, was introduced to level the playing field, giving marginalized groups, like black Americans, equal opportunities in work and education. It was meant to fix systemic discrimination. But now, like woke, it's being misused and weaponized to push agendas and shield racism. These terms were meant to fight inequality. Let's stop letting them be used to tear us down.
The real Israelites weren't white, and we have proof. Let's be real. Bible verse. Deuteronomy 28 makes it clear, stating that the Israelites would be shipped across the world in slavery, stripped of their identity, and suffer oppression for generations. Sound familiar? That prophecy only fits one group, the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade. The proof is undeniable. Ethiopia has the oldest Torah scrolls. The Lemba people in southern Africa carry Jewish priestly DNA. West African tribes like the Ashanti and Yoruba practice traditions nearly identical to ancient Hebrews. Mexico saved 10,000 escaped black slaves. Here's the shocking history they don't want you to know. In 1829, Mexico did what the U.S. wouldn't. They abolished slavery, becoming a beacon of hope for enslaved black people escaping the brutality of the American South. While America was enforcing slavery, Mexico refused to sign a fugitive slave treaty, making sure that anyone who stepped on its soil was free. This bold move made Mexico the secret escape route in a southern underground railroad, where as many as 10,000 escaped slavery and found freedom. Namiemto, a village in Mexico, became home to these newly freed black people who passed down their legacy of courage. Even when slave hunters like the Texas Rangers came to capture escapees, the Mexican army stood strong, protecting the fugitives and refusing to turn them away. This powerful history isn't just the past, it's alive today, as descendants in Namiemto celebrate Juneteenth, honoring their ancestors' bravery and Mexico's commitment to freedom.
Everybody's heard about the Aztecs. Everybody's heard about the Maya. But before the Aztecs and before the Maya, there were a culture who are referred to as the Olmecs. We don't know what they called themselves. That's what the Aztecs called them. They called them the Olmecs, and it means the rubber people. They worked in giant megalithic constructions. What they're most famous for is these huge carved human heads, which can be on a scale of up to 20 to 25 tons in weight, and which have curious features which have been interpreted variously as Polynesian, African, don't look like classic Native American features. One of the things I've realized is that there is no classic Native American feature. Native Americans have a very complex genetic story with very many different elements brought into it, and we shouldn't be necessarily surprised by the supposedly non-Native American look. It's considered to be the earliest high culture of Central America.
They don't want you to know this. Ethiopia holds the key to the Bible's true history, and they've been hiding it for centuries. Let's talk facts. Ethiopia is mentioned over 40 times in the Bible. It's not just some side note. When has something ever been mentioned 40 times and not been important? Exactly. The Ark of the Covenant, some say it's still hidden in Ethiopia to this day. Acts 8:27, a high-ranking Ethiopian official was taught Christianity directly from the apostles. Yet they want you to believe Christianity came from Europe? Make it make sense. And here's the real kicker. Psalm 68:31 says, Ethiopia shall stretch out her hands unto God. That's biblical prophecy. So why do they erase Ethiopia's role? Because Africa's connection to the Bible destroys the false narrative they built. The truth? The Bible isn't a European book. It's an African story, and they've been hiding that from you. Africans taught the Greeks a lot of what they know, but history won't tell you that. The Greeks didn't just admire Egypt. They studied under African masters. Pythagoras, the so-called father of geometry, spent 22 years in Egypt learning philosophy, geometry, and medicine. Thales, Greece's first philosopher, studied there for 7 years. Even Plato, one of history's greatest thinkers, stayed in Egypt for 13 years, absorbing its ancient wisdom. And Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine, admitted that Imhotep, an African multi-genius, was the real originator of medical knowledge. The famous Pythagorean theorem, Egypt had been using it to build pyramids 1,000 years before Pythagoras was even born. Plato himself said Egyptian education made students sharper and more humane. He even told his own students, if they wanted true wisdom, they had to go to Egypt. Black people are cursed according to the Bible, or so they say. But guess what? That's a complete lie, and I'm about to expose it. The curse of Ham is a biblical myth that's been twisted to spread hate. It's rooted in Genesis 9:25, where Noah curses Canaan, Ham's son, for disrespecting him. But somehow this got twisted into a lie claiming black people were cursed, because Canaan's descendants were associated with Africa, and they're black. But here's the thing. The curse wasn't about skin color. It was about Canaan, and his descendants were the enemies of Israel, not black folks. Now the truth? Stay with me for a moment. Ham's other sons, Cush and Mizraim, helped create powerful African nations, Egypt and Ethiopia. So how could a curse lead to thriving civilizations? It doesn't. Colonizers twisted this story to justify slavery, turning a myth into a weapon for oppression. But guess what? We see through it, and now you do too. The curse of Ham, a total scam. Time to wake up.
In this clip, a Himba mother from Namibia is seen gently licking her baby's eyelids. In many traditional cultures, mothers use their own saliva for cleaning and even medicinal purposes. What do you think? Ancient wisdom or something you wouldn't try?
You tell me and prove to me that black people are violent and that they're going to take over, and I can open up the New York Daily News and show you white people who are daughters, their husbands, their wives, their children, each other off. Well, if we put that in the paper and make it black and white, which is where the whole thing happens. It's in the paper. If a black man does something, it says, John Jones, blacklist, said black, 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 and did the black, black. Now, if a white man does it, it isn't white man Jones. It's just a man. Nondescript, just a regular old raggedy man, went out, killed his 2 daughters and his wife, and shot himself. Now, if he does that, then everybody seems to just either sympathize with it or let it go out the window. But if a black man does it, then any white bigot can point his finger and say, see that? There they go again. Well, that isn't right. It isn't.
They've been lying for centuries. Most of the prophets in the Bible were African, and we have proof. Jesus hid in Egypt as a baby. How does a blonde-haired, blue-eyed man hide in a country full of black and brown people? He doesn't. Here's the truth. Let's talk about Jesus. Matthew 2:13 says his family fled to Egypt. Now tell me, how does a white man blend in with a country of black people? He doesn't. Exodus 2:19 says Moses was mistaken for an Egyptian. And where's Egypt? Africa. Same with Joseph. He grew up in Egypt, surrounded by black people. Ethiopia is mentioned 40+ times in the Bible. Acts 8:27. An Ethiopian official learned the gospel directly from the apostles. If Christianity was European, why was Africa practicing it first? Europe was drowning in filth, disease, and ignorance until African Muslims saved them. Europe was in the Dark Ages. Literally. No sanitation, no education, no medicine. Then the Moors came. These black Muslim scholars from North Africa brought science, math, medicine, engineering, and even the concept of bathing. That's right. They had to teach Europeans how to wash themselves. The Moors ruled Spain for 700 years, building universities, libraries, and surgical centers while Europeans were still living in filth. But after they were kicked out, Europe stole their knowledge and erased them from history. The Moors didn't just visit, they built modern Europe, and they don't want you to know it. Lincoln didn't free the slaves because he cared. He did it for politics. Abraham Lincoln wasn't some great savior. He freed the slaves because he had to. The Civil War was going badly for the North, and he needed a way to hurt the South's economy. So he issued the Emancipation Proclamation. But guess what? It only freed slaves in Confederate states. States that stayed loyal to the North got to keep their slaves. So did he do it for morals? No, he did it to win the war. They won't teach you that in school. They tell black people to just work harder. But what happens when we do? They burn it to the ground. Black Wall Street wasn't the only one. There were over 100 thriving black towns in America. Towns like Rosewood, Oscarville, and Freedmanstown, where black people built their own businesses, banks, and schools, real generational wealth. But guess what happened? They were burned, bombed, and flooded to erase them. Lake Lanier, it was a black town before the government drowned it. Entire communities were stolen using shady laws like eminent domain. And the KKK? They straight up ran black families out of their homes. So next time someone says, "Why don't black people just build wealth?" Tell them, "We did, and they destroyed it." They gave you whitewashed Bible stories, but the facts prove Moses, Solomon, and even Adam were black. Moses. He was raised as an Egyptian prince. Ancient Egyptians were African. How's a white man blending in there? Huh? And in Exodus 4:6, his hand turned leprous, white as snow, and then back to normal. If he was already white, how would that be a miracle? Solomon, he literally says in Song of Solomon 1:5, "I am black and beautiful, not tanned, not sun-kissed, black." Ethiopia even traces its entire royal bloodline to him. And Adam, Genesis 2:7. God made him from the dust of the ground. What color is rich soil? Dark brown to black. Even science agrees. The first humans were African. So why do they keep showing you whitewashed images? American police started as black slave hunting patrols in the South. These weren't noble protectors. They were armed groups paid to track down and capture escaped slaves, bringing them back to plantation owners. After slavery ended, those exact same patrol members didn't disappear. They became our first police officers. This explains why racial targeting is built into the system's DNA. Modern policing wasn't founded on serving communities or public safety. It was designed for one purpose: maintaining control through force. That's the real reason why racial bias in policing persists today. They whitewashed the Bible, but the fact is, all the prophets were black, and we have the proof. Moses, raised in Pharaoh's palace, meaning he looked like the Egyptians, who were black. Paul, Acts 21:38 says he was mistaken for an Egyptian. And Jesus? Revelation 1:14-15. Hair like wool, feet like burned brass. That's black. The Israelites? Deuteronomy 28 describes a people taken on ships, enslaved, and stripped of their identity. That's the transatlantic slave trade, word for word. King Solomon, Song of Solomon 1:5, he said, "I am black and beautiful." Not tanned, not metaphorical, black. Even outside the Bible, historians like Herodotus described ancient Egyptians as woolly-haired and dark-skinned. Every race was enslaved. Asians, whites, Europeans, everyone. But they don't teach you that. They want you to believe slavery was only about black people, but that's not the full truth. The word slave actually comes from Slavic people, because for centuries, white slaves from Eastern Europe were captured and sold by Arabs, the Ottoman Empire, and even other Europeans. But did you know China had its own slaves too? During the Shang Dynasty, 1600 BCE, war captives became lifelong slaves. The Han Dynasty, 206 BCE, used slaves for hard labor, and the Tang Dynasty, 618 CE, had a massive slave trade, even trafficking people from Korea and Africa. Even the Irish were sent to the Caribbean as indentured servants, and millions of Asians, especially Chinese coolies, were forced into brutal labor worldwide. So why do they only focus on black slavery? Because the transatlantic slave trade was the first system that enslaved people purely based on race. They lied to you. Africans were in America long before Columbus or even the Vikings, and we've got the evidence to prove it. Did you know ancient accounts and archaeological finds point to Africans reaching the Americas centuries before Europeans? The Mali Empire, led by Mansa Abu Bakr II, launched a massive expedition across the Atlantic in the 1300s. Records from explorers, even Columbus himself, describe seeing people with dark skin in the Americas who appeared to have come from Africa. And it's not just stories. Artifacts like African-styled spears, carvings, and even DNA links have been found in pre-Columbian sites in Central and South America. These discoveries suggest every major prophet in the Bible was African, and we have the proof. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Solomon, Jesus. The Bible takes place in North and East Africa and the Middle East, which was once part of the African tectonic plate. Egypt, Canaan, and Israel all were part of ancient Africa's influence. DNA studies show the earliest human ancestors came from Africa. So, the people living in biblical times, they were black and brown. Even the Bible says so. Moses passed as the grandson of Pharaoh, Exodus 2:10. How could he do that if he didn't look like the Egyptians? Jesus himself had skin like bronze and hair like wool. Revelation 1:14-15. Why do they keep showing them as white? Because Africans were the original Native Americans, and we have the proof. In 1909, a discovery in the Grand Canyon shook the world. Ancient artifacts with undeniable African origins. Hieroglyphs resembling those from Egypt, statues with African features, and even evidence of advanced mining techniques were found deep within the canyon. Researchers at the time claimed these findings pointed to African explorers arriving in America thousands of years ago. But here's the catch. This information was quickly buried, dismissed as a hoax, and locked away. Why? Because it disrupts the narrative that Europeans were the first to discover America. If you say black people sold their own into slavery, you're falling for a colonialist lie. Here's why. The idea that all Africans were one people is a European concept. The reality? Africa is massive, home to thousands of cultures, languages, and ethnic groups. A tribe in West Africa didn't see themselves as the same as a tribe hundreds of miles away. They weren't selling their own. They were selling outsiders, prisoners of war. Let's flip the script. If Ireland invaded Poland, would you say they were attacking their own people just because both are white? No? Then why do people say that about Africa? Because white supremacy flattens every African culture into one label: black. These Africans made Italy get on their knees, and they're the only African nation to never be conquered. In 1896, Ethiopia stood alone against the might of Italy in the Battle of Adwa and won. Italy thought Ethiopia would be easy to colonize, but Emperor Menelik II and Empress Tatu had other plans. With a united force of over 100,000 Ethiopians, men and women, they crushed the Italian army, outsmarting them with superior strategy, intelligence, and sheer determination. This wasn't just a victory. It was a humiliation. Italian troops were forced to retreat, leaving behind thousands of casualties, weapons, and their pride. Ethiopia didn't just stop colonization. They became a symbol of African resistance and strength. How is this not taught in every history class? Was this left out on purpose to downplay Africa's power? Christianity was African before it was European. Here's the proof they don't teach you. Ethiopia became one of the first Christian nations in the world, officially adopting the religion in the 4th century, long before most of Europe. The kingdom of Aksum even minted coins with Christian symbols, showing how deeply it was ingrained in their society. And here's the twist. Ethiopian Christians claim to guard the Ark of the Covenant to this day, hidden in a church in Aksum. Plus, Saint Augustine, one of Christianity's greatest thinkers, was African, born in what is now Algeria. Africa didn't just adopt Christianity, it shaped it. So why isn't this common knowledge? Because history often erases Africa's influence. But the truth is undeniable. Want more truths they don't teach you? Like this video and subscribe for more untold African history. Africans were here first, and they didn't just arrive. They taught Native Americans how to farm. And we have proof. Did you know that maize, one of the foundational crops of the Americas, has genetic traces linking it to ancient African agricultural methods? Ancient African seafarers like the Mali Empire are believed to have reached the Americas centuries before Columbus. Carvings in Mesoamerica, including the Olmec statues, display distinctly African features, showing undeniable cultural exchange. And it wasn't just statues. Farming tools found in pre-Columbian America are strikingly similar to those used in ancient Africa. For example, African hoe designs closely match those found in Native American farming sites. There's even evidence in ancient texts and oral traditions that African travelers brought advanced agricultural techniques with them. Why isn't this history widely taught in schools? Was it erased on purpose? The Bible talks about African slavery. You won't believe what's written. The Bible references slavery multiple times, but did it mention African slavery? Ancient texts describe Egypt, an African civilization, enslaving Israelites. However, in the transatlantic slave trade era, European colonizers twisted biblical verses to justify enslaving Africans. Scriptures like, "Servants, obey your masters," were misused, stripping them from their historical and cultural context. But here's the deeper question. Why wasn't the Bible's condemnation of cruelty and injustice equally highlighted? Was the truth manipulated to serve an agenda? The Bible's history with slavery is complex and controversial. What do you think? Was it misinterpreted or deliberately misused?
Was Jesus actually black? The evidence might the Bible's most important figures were African, and they never told you this. Did you know Moses
incredible but true. Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba once disguised herself America long before Columbus, and we have proof. Massive stone heads with African features stand tall in Mexico, carved by the Olmec civilization over 3,000 years ago. King Abubakar II of Mali launched an epic fleet of 2,000 ships across the Atlantic in the 1300s, and the evidence is everywhere. African architectural techniques in ancient American buildings, West African cotton found in Mexican sites. Even identical religious symbols appear on both continents. Our history books lied to us. The real story is African sailors were the first to map the American shores, establishing trade routes that shaped both continents forever. African kingdoms weren't just victims of slavery, they were masterminds behind it. Dahomey warriors captured and sold over 2 million of their own people into slavery. Most history books won't tell you this brutal truth. The Dahomey kingdom wasn't just another African nation. It was the Amazon warrior kingdom that built an empire through selling humans. Their elite female soldiers would raid villages at night, capturing men, women, and children. The kingdom's economy depended on trading slaves to Europeans. They even had annual ceremonies where they sacrificed hundreds of captives. Centuries later, their descendants still grapple with this dark legacy. Makes you wonder how different African history could have been without this kingdom's role in the slave trade.
This queen executed every man she married and built an empire that made Islamic leaders tremble. At just 16, Amina seized the throne of Zarzau, shattering every religious rule about female leadership. Trained in warfare since childhood, she personally led armies into battle, conquering 34 cities across West Africa. Her signature move? Forcing defeated kings to marry her, then executing them the next morning. She revolutionized metallurgy, established new trade routes, and built massive fortifications that still stand today. Despite religious scholars trying to erase her story, Queen Amina's 34-year reign as Africa's fiercest warrior queen remains legendary.
Everything you know about ancient Egypt's rulers is wrong. Scientists found DNA proof. The pharaohs weren't white or European like Hollywood shows. They had dark skin, African features, and strong genetic links to sub-Saharan Africa. Ancient Egyptian art tells the real story. Their paintings and sculptures show rulers with brown skin and curly hair. Even Cleopatra, famously played by Elizabeth Taylor, likely had African ancestry. This isn't just about movies getting it wrong. It's about erasing thousands of years of African achievement. Ancient Egypt built pyramids, invented writing systems, and mastered astronomy while Europe was still in the Stone Age. Next time you watch a movie about Egypt, remember, yes, you're watching African history, not European fantasy. Imagine turning the Bible into a battle plan. Stealing military tactics from the Bible made Emperor Menelik II unstoppable. At the Battle of Adwa in 1896, this Ethiopian ruler took the Book of Samuel's strategy against the Philistines and used it against Italian colonizers. His army split into 3 divisions, just like King David's ancient formations. He positioned troops on high ground at night, letting them descend like biblical warriors at dawn. The Italians never saw it coming. Over 7,000 Italian troops were defeated that day, and Ethiopia became the only African nation to resist European colonization successfully. Sometimes, the best battle plans aren't in military textbooks but hidden in sacred texts. She burned her own city to ashes just to save her kingdom. Queen Ya Asante made the ultimate sacrifice when British forces came for the Ashanti's sacred golden stool. With her grandson imprisoned and her people facing colonization, she rallied 5,000 warriors behind her. Leading them into battle herself, she fought the British Empire for months. Rather than surrender their capital, she ordered it burned to the ground. The British won the war but never captured their prize. One queen's defiance became Africa's battle cry, proving that sometimes you have to destroy everything to save what matters most.
The oldest paintings of Jesus on earth show him as a black man, and they're not where you'd expect. Hidden in Ethiopia